And then I'm just checking on Facebook. I think we might be live. Yes, I see us. Hello, Book Club, hosted by Heather Skinner. I am so excited. We are live streaming for the first time for our interview on our Facebook group page. And I'm also recording on Zoom. So hopefully with my test today, we did have a little choppy internet. I'm hoping that it's sounding better on your end. And this is also being recorded, and it'll be on our corresponding YouTube channel on Monday. So you can always see it there as well if you don't get to watch live right now. And I am so excited. We have Niamh Schmid and Rebecca Schmid with us. They are the authors of The Exiled, of Shade and Shadow. And that was the book that you voted in for our November 2021 Book of the Month read. And they also have book 2, and that's To Take a World, The Ghost Maker. And if you guys want to show book 3 really quickly. There we go. Do you want to read the title, just in case, so if they can't see?
It's The Exiled, A Game of Wits.
Perfect. I'm so excited. I was just telling them before we started going live, I just sat down this week and I got to read their second book and I loved it so much. So I can't wait to read your third book. And I actually wanted to start off with introductions. I love in the back of your book, your author bios, the way you wrote that. So first I want to bring up, Niamh is unfortunately a human. That she says in her author bio, and I love it. And Rebecca is actually not Niamh, also mentioned in her author bio. So I wanted to make sure you guys get to introduce yourself one by one so we know who's who.
Oh, sorry, so we got the audio a little jumbled there. Could you repeat that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I wanted to make sure that you guys get to introduce yourselves one by one so no one's mistaken for the other.
Me first? Okay. So I'm Niamh Schmid, and I am a human. And we are sister-in-laws. So we were best friends first. And I wrote book 2, but then I also write Luco, who's one of the main characters in book 1 and in book 3.
And I'm Rebecca Schmid. I'm the one who married a brother, so that's why we have the same last name. But I'm mostly responsible for Astra in the first book.
I love it. And then too, if people, I know we have new members, if they want to hear more about your process, they can go back on our YouTube channel too. And you did talk a lot more about how you do that writing process in our very first interview in November. So, and if anybody is watching, I'm going to be keeping an eye out separately on my phone to see if you have comments, if you want to pop in and say hello, watching live on Facebook, and your questions while you're watching. So please do say hi while you're watching and any questions you have for us. And actually, I wanted to, if you want to give kind of a brief bio of each of your books that you have out right now, would that be okay to get started with that?
Sure. You ready the first one?
Yeah, you do book 1.
So the first one, which some of you have gotten to read, it picks up with Astra and Luco. Astra is sort of this war hero over this big war that's just wrapped up, and she gets exiled from her own country. So she goes off and she gets stuck with Prince Luco, who is not her favorite person in the world. But things go awry very quickly. They end up having to try and flee the country with the rest of Luco's siblings, and yeah, it goes downhill really fast.
Really fast, yeah.
So, why don't you do book 2?
Okay. And then book 2 is on a completely different world, but it does eventually tie in, we promise. You'll see a lot of the tying in actually in book 3 and in book 4. But it takes place on Bano at the end of a war as well, but a war that is being lost. So Scala, who is the antagonist, has pretty much taken over the world with the help of these mysterious creatures called Drogons. And the main characters of this book are basically trying to survive and see if there's any way to get the world back after it's been completely demolished.
Our book 3, which is back in with Luco and Astra, is Game of Wits. Astra has made it to Nithril, but they're not too friendly either. She's being basically blackmailed by the King of Nithril to go off and play bounty hunter, which she's not really keen on. Things go downhill even more, but we meet more characters which start to tie in our worlds again, so don't want to say too much without spoiling the first book, so.
Right.
Yeah, we don't like spoilers. I know I try. I have so many questions, and I was like, oh, I don't want to spoil. So if there's any I ask that would lead to a spoiler, just let me know.
I will tell you, if you are going to talk about book 2, just refer to a certain character by fame.
Yes, okay, good. That was my thought process with that. So I'm glad. Perfect. I definitely wanted to talk, if you can give any more expansion on that, because I think it's so unique what you're doing with your series, where you get to introduce so many different worlds, and so many different characters book by book, and that it's going to be tying together. I think that's so neat what you're doing. Also introducing so many genres that way, and getting to do so much in one series. It's amazing. Sharon has also read book 1 and 2 and loved it. And she was kind of curious a little bit more. She saw the end of book 2, where you write a little bit more about the worlds, and how the worlds are finding their heroes, and kind of explain that part of how we're going through them. So she was curious how Bay fits into this, and when we're going to keep seeing each character. Is it an every other pattern? Are they going to slowly merge as we keep reading along?
So what we're doing right now is every other book. So Bay is going to be returning in book 4, which is coming out hopefully this summer. And so you'll see at the end of book 3, for instance, it says Astra and Luco are going to return in book 5. So books 1, 3, and 5 are Luco and Astra, and books 2, 4, and 6 are Bay and Fane.
Our book 7 is when we introduce the sci-fi world, and then they all tie together for book 8.
Yep, you get all the characters.
I love it. And I love how organized you are too, so that you already have this mapped out. You can let your readers know. Also, like, just a reminder for the readers, you have such a great scheduling for when you know they're going to be released. So we don't have to wait too long, because we're excited to see what happens next. So I love that too. So we got to know you guys a little bit with questions in our first interview. And I did want to bring up some more stuff that I've gotten to find out and hear you talk about in other extra events that I've gotten to go and see you at, because you are local authors for me, which is awesome. So I know you alluded to it, Niamh, in the first one, but you have dyslexia. So would you like to tell the members what that's like for your writing process and working together?
It's very exciting. So yeah, I have dyslexia, and at least when I talk, if I haven't rehearsed like several things in my head, I talk and it's really evident I have dyslexia. Obviously I've rehearsed a bunch of what we're gonna say today. But when we're writing, I do mix up quite a few things, and that's why it's great that I have Becca, because she will follow behind, and if I mix something up. When I did book 2 by myself, it just required a lot of reading back, because usually my first drafts are very interesting. So we'll put it that way. I do want to say I apparently handle it really well, and our editor has said that for someone with dyslexia, I do really well, and I think I can credit a lot of that to the creativity of my mom growing up. So she would always be having me read out loud, and that helped a lot with the processing and the ability to be able to write down and process things that are written down. She also, for instance, wrote me, she figured out how to teach me to write by writing in a mirror. And that's how so she just did a lot of creative things that helped me be able to cope with having dyslexia. And so the more I write, the easier it gets, but there are definitely some days where it's just like, nope, my brain is not working. I'm sorry, Becca.
Oh. And what's that like? Are there certain maybe certain things you do over and over again that maybe, Rebecca, you notice and already see it and go, oh, yep, that's the same. I know what this is. Like, what's that like on the other side of that?
The funniest thing is really her homonyms when it's said the same. I can see when she talked about her mom having her read out loud. Out loud, it would make sense, but on paper, it's my favorite is still courtyard. Quart yard. But those are the biggest things. Or she'll get in there and I'll see she like types out a word and then she erases half of it and she types out another half and I'll go in and I'll give the correct spelling because she knows it's off but she can't quite find what it is and it kind of just that lag almost.
Oh, I love that. It's, I'm homeschooling my daughter and it's actually reminding me the courtyard. Like she was just doing a workbook with compound words and they had the pictures and it's making me think of like a little court measurement or something like it would have been in her book. I love that.
I was reading somewhere, so don't quote me. I'm not a medical professional. If I remember correctly, this is what I read. Don't take this as law, but I found it personally. It's a very accurate way for how I struggle with it. It was talking about how some of the problem with being dyslexic is you can't properly chunk the information of written language. So you have to pretty much memorize every single word in the language you're using. So that definitely comes out when I read, but it also comes out when I write, and that's why I'll mix up words that sound the same because I've memorized the wrong one.
Oh, that is interesting.
If I'm tired, it kind of shuts off and I can't recall the memory of the words, and so it'll just kind of look like gibberish. But that's the most like accurate description I've stumbled upon. It's just that I have to memorize everything.
That's a lot. And I brought up homeschooling too. I believe, were you both homeschooled growing up?
Yep.
Do you feel like that contributed to being published authors now? Did that give you room to kind of play with that early and enjoy it? Or, what else maybe was a tool from that?
Well, we wouldn't have met otherwise because it was our physical ed of the day to go muck out a pasture for 3 hours.
And we happened to ride at the same barn,
Yep.
so that's how we met. But yeah, no, the homeschool program we did particularly, it was very writing intensive. I would be reading a full novel usually every 1 or 2 weeks, and then writing corresponding papers. So early on, I sort of figured out, hey, this isn't so bad, and I could do this. And then it would have story assignments, and they were supposed to be like 3 pages, and I would turn in 12. And my mom encouraged that, in schools you could kind of get shut down by these poor hairy teachers that don't want to grade 12 pages. But that was definitely encouraged, I think, for both of us.
Yeah, I did a lot of writing, which I think was great because especially with someone with dyslexia, you would think, oh, you don't want to be writing a lot, you don't want to be, But my mom encouraged to gain the momentum and to get the love of it, even if you weren't good. She didn't care if you were good or not. It was just, this is fun.
Oh, I love that.
That's what I liked that, yeah.
That's great. And she came up with such creative tools, like to help you with that, like the mirror writing. That's really neat. So I definitely have a gazillion more questions for you, and I'm going to keep up. I see we have a few people watching on Facebook, so I'm going to see if I can check and see. I don't think they have commented yet, so if anybody watching has questions or just wants to say hi, please do, and we'll give you a shout out, and I'll ask your questions, make sure that they can, they know what you're asking in the comments, so I'll keep my eye on that. So I'm going to go on to my next question. I actually wanted to ask, we did a bonus interview last year. We got to meet with the Schoharie Library Writers Group, and then also attached to that, I had a separate meeting with some local libraries, the directors, and they were talking about how there's a big trend in audiobooks right now. Like that's the big thing. And I know that you both like major in music. You both play the piano, I believe. So is it both piano?
Yes, piano.
Piano, yep.
So is that something that like audio must be very important to you? Is that something you're thinking of doing with your books, turning into an audiobook?
Yes. So mostly it's a matter of time. Audiobooks are a huge time commitment for all the recording and sound editing. For every like hour of speaking that you record, it's gonna be it's
Oh, no.
I think I lost you somehow, but I saw we were still going on Facebook, so that's good. Hopefully We didn't lose. That was the weirdest thing. You just kind of flashed. I am so sorry.
No problem.
What did you get any of it, or?
If you want to just kind of, you were saying it's very time consuming. For every hour of the recording.
Yeah, you would spend about 2 or 3 as much time editing that sound and formatting and putting it all together. So, with all of that in mind, and with us being in our senior year of college, we decided it was a little much on top of publishing all these books. Our plan is to start looking at it actually this summer and getting some of those done.
Yeah, because we have all the equipment to record.
Oh, cool. Oh, that's a good step, and like to have that already, be ready with when you're ready to do that. That actually leads me to one of my next questions. I'm wondering now, because I know you're very good at art. You guys are just so talented at everything you do. I love it. I think people might be able to see it back there. I was so lucky I won the map of your world that you drew, hanging over there over my books. So it made me wonder, like, is it a time thing too, because you outsourced the cover illustration? Is that something because of time that you did instead of making it yourselves?
Well, so we're still budding artists, so we're really good, but we're also very particular in what styles we have strong suits in. So Becca's very good at maps, and she's very good at portraits, and I'm very good at like figure drawing, but I'm not necessarily very good at landscapes, and Becca's not per se.
Having an entire scene composition is a big challenge.
And we had a particular style in mind, and so we didn't want to have to be stressing about it. And we found just this fantastic artist, so we wanted something that like we could just enjoy getting the result of and not be like fussing over it, because we're already fussing over every other aspect of the book. So it was nice because now it's like an excitement thing to be waiting for every cover, because you know he's going to turn out something wonderful. And we just recently sent him all the specs for book 4, and so I'm currently very excited about that. So it was picking what we could commit to with our time, because how many hours did it take you to make a map?
The last one I made took me about 18 hours.
Oh, wow.
So it's a lot of
one that I've seen. Like, it does look like it would take a long time.
Yeah, so it's a lot of time, and so I think that was kind of all the different things that
his name is Jake Bartok. He has a whole website with all of his artwork, and there's so much cool stuff. Definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, we're nerds, and we found him because he did great Star Wars art. He turned all the Star Wars characters into medieval characters, and it was so cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
Awesome. Perfect.
Oh, that's neat. I love that. Oh, we do have people starting to say hello. Bonnie Jean Yepson Weinman's watching. Hi. She says hello, ladies. Oh, Jenny Mosier is watching. She says hello, all. Great to see you. Hi. We have Josephine Wrightson and Steve Manchester and Corey McKenzie watching too. Hi, everybody. If you have questions, please let me know. Any comments you want to add as we're talking? I'm so glad to have you here live with us. My next question is about, I love how your world has so many different other languages. But as we read it, it's translated in English, but we know that there are parts where they're speaking other languages. Have you ever thought about making a translation of them? Is that something, like, because your world building is so complete and immersive. So it made me wonder, what's that like behind the scenes for you?
So we do have sort of like I can talk. Look at that, I'm turning into you.
Yeah.
We have some preliminary sketches of some of the conlangs. Basic grammar rules, a few different words, kind of a scattering. Mostly we have in mind stylistic, like how it would sound, like what kind of vowel and consonant groupings they would use, whether it would come off as a more like harsh or whether it might be a tonal language. We also have writing systems. Nithrillian, for example, is kind of cool compared to Maramethian. Maramethian is like top to bottom writing.
It's like they call them like chimes.
Yes, instead of sentences, they're like chimes of writing that kind of goes in rows.
Oh, that is so cool. I knew it. I knew you guys had something in the works. You're so detail oriented. I love that. Have you ever thought about doing anything where you would be able to added on or like release it separately in some way as part of your series or like an art kind of edition, like merchandising?
I would obviously love it if someday down the road we could have a little dictionary of some of the vocabulary. I know we at least have most of the symbols we have it for is it the Elvish tongue or is that Lytashian?
Lytashian.
So we have Lytashian. We have all of the different symbols for all of the letters, and for Mare Methia, we have all the different chimes. So, and I like to think they'd look really cool on stuff.
I'd like to think so, but maybe I'm biased.
Oh, you're allowed to be biased. I agree. I think it would look awesome. I can't wait to see what you guys will come up with that when you get a chance to. Because like you said, you're balancing a lot. So the amount that you already have prepped is just amazing. And I love it and the work that you do. Oh, my next thing I wanted to bring up, I love, especially in book 1, you see it, your thoughtfulness with the animals in the book. A lot goes into how they treat Astra's horse and how the horse reacts around other people. I thought it was really cool. And I saw in your bio that Niamh, you have mini ponies. Are your horses kind of the horse in the book? Is that based on either of your mini ponies by any chance?
So actually, Dancer is based off of Becca's dog.
Oh.
As weird as it is, the sass and everything, but a lot of the knowledge of like horses and horse care and such comes from both of our backgrounds, from horse riding, and then obviously I own mini ponies. So it's come from a lot of us reading other books where people clearly didn't do research, and it's like, wait, no, your horse would be dead by now. What are you doing? So that's probably where it comes from, just one of our many hobbies.
I love that. And there are a lot of hobbies mentioned throughout, like archery, which I think is so fascinating. And yeah, Rebecca, is that something you do?
Yes, maybe not particularly well. Actually, my husband is a pretty good archer, and anytime I'm unsure, I'm just like, Joe, okay, is this right? And he'll tell me yes or no. So
I love that. Also in there, I love the mention of chess and the way that you connect it to the plot in book 1. I think that's so cool. I love playing chess. Our whole family does. And I've actually seen the layered chess, like you kind of mentioned in your book. And I was wondering, is that actually called Tetra chess, or is that something you did for your Tetra worlds, calling it Tetra chess?
So Tetra chess is actually different. I think that we never learned about like that layered one until after, and my dad's a Star Trekkie, so a Trekkie. So he apparently it's a Star Trekkie. I know, okay. That's fine. But so I guess it comes from Star Trek is where it comes from, at least now why it's popular recently. Ours is different. One of the reasons being the boards are different sizes, and there's different sizes for particular reasons. I think Luco explains it a bunch.
So it's a different amount of pieces.
Different amount of pieces.
Very different rules between the boards and how they interact. Like your actions on the top board do affect the 2 lower boards and so on.
The idea morphed from just normal chess, and it now kind of represents the 3 different worlds. So it's like a foreshadowing of the whole series as well, the 3 boards representing 3 worlds, and it's important in book 3.
Ooh.
Tetra is the root for 4. So it's not only the 3, but the interaction, which is sort of that 4th realm in between, which we do begin to talk about starting in book 3.
Ooh, I'm excited. I was curious if it was going to keep connecting through all of the books, because I just love the way it tied into what was happening in the story and what you're mentioning in the gameplay. I thought that was so creative. It's so cool. I love that. I'm glad that it's going to carry on into the other books. Something that a lot of the members in our book club really commented on while we were discussing your book in November, they loved the way you described the weather. They felt like it was its own character. I don't know if you saw some of those posts. So I wanted to hear more about what you put into that. Was it just a very thoroughly written world building?
So it morphed. It started back when we first started writing the very first draft when we were like 15, and whenever I didn't know what to say, I would be like, well, it's raining or it's cloudy. And so then it morphed into, wow, it's raining a lot. And so then Merimethia was very rainy. And then as we got older and understood things like ecosystems and weather patterns, and we looked at the map, then we deliberately did go in and we're like, okay, so this makes a lot of sense for this weather pattern and this weather pattern and things going on here. And then there are definitely a couple times where we kind of deliberately are reflecting the mood or reflecting what's going on or foreshadowing something. So it stemmed from me just not knowing what to say. And Becca would always be like, why is it raining?
Oh, I love that. And the readers really responded to that too. So it morphed into this, like, they looked at it as its own character, the way they were describing it. So it's really cool the way you incorporated it and hearing how it stemmed. That's really neat. So I wanted to ask who wrote the characters, because I apologize if you mentioned this in the first one, because I know you took turns writing characters. So Mariah and Omath. Who wrote
Omath was unfortunately my creation. I apologize on behalf of everybody who wanted to stab him by the end of it. Mariah, like, I wrote the basis for, but then she kind of was both of us.
When we have like scenes where it's one character interacting with sort of a less main character like Mariah, if it's Luco and Niamh's writing Luco, it's kind of difficult for her to sit down and just write out an entire scene by herself with, like, I don't know, me providing commentary.
Yeah, she'll just stare awkwardly at the screen.
So that's when I would step in and maybe take over that kind of side character a little bit more, but Mariah's mostly Niamh's.
But like Keishif is either one of us.
Oh, that's neat. Yeah, because I'd been kind of trying to picture after our first interview, the way you were talking about, you would sit there and very conversationally write out like dialogue and pieces of the story. And I started to wonder, so was it easier to write if you're writing characters that are speaking to each other? Or did it get a little complicated? Like if you have two characters that are fighting or talking that you're doing one of, like did that get weird not to have the correspondence back and forth?
I mean, there's still sort of that corresponding intent. When it can get a little weird is view. So let's say it's Luco's view, and I'm writing something that someone is doing and Luco's watching. I'm going to write out sort of the basics, and Niamh is going to go in and add the Lucoisms that make it feel more like his view.
Oh, that's really neat. I love that.
So like, yeah, so an example would be, and the opposite, Astra does not really use metaphors. Luco uses a lot of metaphors because Luco is very bookish and he has kind of been locked up in one place for a long time with a lot of books. But Astra does not use a lot of metaphors. So whenever I am in charge of describing something Astra's seeing, I often will accidentally put a metaphor in there because I work in metaphors. So Becca will then go back and she'll be like, okay, this is what she saw and this is what Niamh wanted her to see, but I'm going to change it so it's not a metaphor and it sounds like Astra's the one that's seeing it.
I love that. And that leads me into like working with the metaphors. I was going to ask you, there's a quote in there. Astra found more and more that she was never sure how seriously she ought to take Luco. So with translating metaphors, I feel like there's a lot of sarcasm in there too. Was that hard to translate into written dialogue? How did that work for you?
I think sarcasm is easily one of our strong points.
Yeah.
That will work its way in whether we plan on it or not. So.
I love it though. They all have their different personalities too, and it all translated differently for each, which is really cool to see how well thought out each character is. So I also follow you on your newsletter, which I love, and your Instagram. And I noticed you started doing these really fun, like comic strip art, like day in the life kinds of things. And I love these extra things. So first, I'd love for you to share and remind people how they can follow you on your social media. And I was also curious, are you kind of playing with a different genre when you're doing the comic strip art? Is that something you're exploring?
First of all, our Instagram tag is Shara Reeves, so SCHARA REEVES. I did it. I don't know why I didn't make you do it.
I know you got that in. I was like, here we go.
That's on Instagram. That's on Twitter. That's if you look that up, that we should pop right on up. If we don't, just add press at the end, and I'm sure it will. The comic strips are, that's something we're exploring a little bit. It started out because those are a lot of our school adventures. So if you want to know where Luco and Astra get their really weird, like humorous conversations from, it's from us. And so we end up having a lot of weird experiences at school. So I was like, oh, this sounds funny to put down on a comic strip. So I've been experimenting a little bit. We just write down things that happen, and then I eventually translate them down to a comic when I have time.
I love watching out for them. Like when I see them, I'm like, oh my god, this is so funny and like relatable and fun, and I love that. It feels like even though it's different scenarios, like the behind the scenes of the writers of these awesome books, like you can kind of see the personalities a little bit like blending in with what you're reading. I think that's cool. You introduced some really cool characters throughout like 1 and 2 that I've read so far. There are a lot in book 1. I'm wondering, will we see again? So there's the Lagreen, and the Forest Shadow Fairies I thought were really interesting. Are we going to get to see some of these things that are alluded to in book 1 later on?
So those in particular, they're sort of Latashian. Latash is known for its variety of dangerous animals, especially in the Forest of Riddles. So the characters do make multiple trips through and across. You will see more animals. We will also eventually be putting out sort of the prequels to these, which is The War, and that's mostly following Astra and her brother. They're dealing with these creatures day in and day out, so you'll see a lot of them there.
Yeah. So as of now, the Ligrian and the Shadow Fairies specifically aren't in. It's possible one might be in book 5, but there are other creatures that you will meet, and there is one in book 3.
I'm excited. I can't wait. And then book 1, we hear about dragons, but then book 2, we hear about drogons. So I don't want to lead to any questions that would give away spoilers. But what was that like? Like coming up with that? Did you guys sit down and brainstorm and say, what's this dragon concept? How could we take it to another level that no one's ever seen? Because I thought it was super unique what you did with those.
So first of all, if you read really carefully in book 1, Luco talks about drogons. I don't know if you got that, but if you read it back, he does at least 1 or 2 occasions. And then second of all, drogons morphed too. If you were to ask me where we came up with the idea, I don't remember when it was like, oh.
It was to take a world of Ghostmaker, which had originally been a totally separate series before we sort of wrapped these all into one. And I do remember reading Niamh's very first draft and going, did she misspell dragons? Which is something we make a joke of later on, but yeah, it definitely morphed into a very key role into this series that we can't say too much about.
But it's very important. They are very important to the series.
It's really cool. I don't want to spoil for anybody that are, as they read along, but I definitely want to put it out there. If you love dragons and you want to see a really unique concept, what they did with it, I've never seen anything like it before. As it progresses in book 2, I'm like, this is so cool. Like, how did they think of this? This is so neat. And I did want to ask, seeing we're talking about book 2 a little bit more now too, and you did kind of mention, so book 1 is written by both of you. Book 2 is only written by Niamh, and I believe, Rebecca, you're listed as like a proofreader. So what was that like? Rebecca, did you at the same time maybe write another book in the series? Did you take turns, or what was that? How'd that change your writing process?
The Ghostmaker in particular was done before we really made this into a cohesive thing. So as she sort of reworked it to fit into the series, yes, I did start a side project. I am writing, it's going to be 2 books on the sort of main antagonist that we see in book 1, which is Tyron. And it takes place about 20 years prior
something
to
like that.
book 1,
something like
and
that.
progresses up to date. So I have almost both books in their complete first drafts, and we're looking to put them out within a year.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Oh, I'm excited to keep watching what you guys are putting out. This is so neat. You're so
And those covers,
Those
Becca drew the covers for.
Oh, cool. So we will get to see some cover art from you
Yes.
down the line.
Yeah, because what happened is Becca was drawing for fun, and then we're like, oh my goodness, this is perfect for Tyron's prequel.
Oh, I can't wait to see all of this stuff. You've got me so excited. I keep hearing what's to come, and I can't wait. Oh my gosh. I'm going to look through my million questions. I see more people are watching. Hi. I don't see any questions, though, so hopefully I'm not missing anything. Hopefully, if you type in any questions, it'll show us on Facebook. So I'm going to keep my eye out if anyone has questions while you're watching. Let's see. So one thing I noticed about characters, which I believe are both your characters, Niamh, in book 1, you had Luco, and book 2, Fane. And I noticed they both kind of have something that I don't know, kind of connects their personalities in a way. Like it's not, they definitely feel like two separate characters, but they both have this really awful self-esteem. Like the way they talk to themselves in their head just makes me feel so bad for them. I was curious, is that something that, like, I don't know, is this an arc that you enjoy exploring to hopefully like increase their realizing that they're, you know, they're powerful as you go along? Is this a message you're sending, or did I just happen to just be so sad for these characters that I connected it? Like, oh, don't do that to yourselves.
I didn't per se think of that before. In that sense, they both had different messages I did want to send. So Luco, you know, his background and his family, and being able to find out that he is precious and worth something and deserves to be loved, that was definitely a very deliberate message. Fane's message is a bit different. I'll try and say it without spoilers, but the amount of pressure that was put on him in a very impossible situation has kind of made it so he has these thoughts, because anything less than perfect, and he's obviously the one that must be responsible for why everything's gone wrong. And I see that a lot in different people, and I think it's a very unhealthy thing. So I wanted to explore that, and as the series progresses and you see more of Fane and him realizing that these unrealistic expectations that everyone puts on him, I don't know, throughout book 2, I don't know if you noticed it, but it was like, whenever they got in trouble, okay, Fane, you're obviously gonna save us, all right? Let's forget you're almost dying, it's fine. It's just, I've witnessed it a lot, and I find it really unhealthy, and I kind of wanted to show it, why it's unhealthy in a fantasy and fun book, but to still be able to think about that, and maybe the readers will see that. So I'm glad you caught on.
Yeah, I think it's a really important message, because I've heard, and I know I've heard it in multiple places where people will bring up the fact of like, if you spoke to yourself, like if you have a moment where you're doing bad self-esteem in your mind, and you thought of to say that to somebody else, like you would never say it to somebody else the way you speak to yourself. So I did catch that in the characters, and I'm like, oh, I can't wait until they're like, okay, I get it. I'm confident now, and I should be. So I'm definitely rooting for them. I definitely caught that with the two. And I love that, you know, you did put messages behind them. So Rebecca, did you have any main messages you were putting behind some of the characters that you wrote as well?
I think with Astra it was kind of interesting. You see a lot of the whole like sort of independent female trope, and it's a sort of, I think, a response in literature to having women be super dependent. But Astra's very young, and she kind of takes that too far, and there's a difference between independence and isolation. In the way that she cuts herself off from family and friends, to the harm of those family and friends, it becomes sort of a theme throughout the series that she has to deal with and learn to grow past.
I love it. I mean, fiction, fantasy, it's a really good way to bring up real life topics that, you know, readers really do think about while they're reading, and it kind of makes connections in their own life. So I love the way you have it in there in a fun way. It's its own fun story, but there's a lot in there that's, you know, a really good thing to think about in real life too. So I appreciate the way you both broke that down. That's awesome. I see we have a comment. Oh, Bonnie Jean Jensen-Weinman said, all your questions are great, Heather. So I don't think anyone has any questions yet. Thank you, Bonnie. But if you guys think of any questions so far, please just add them in at any time. So we've got another question. Oh, so you have, steampunk in book 2. And in book 1, it's kind of a low technology, and even with the steampunk, it feels very low tech, steampunky, cool world building. Was your reasoning behind that because they have magical powers you call gifting, that maybe technology wouldn't be so necessary?
For Idris?
So for Idris, yes, definitely. The sort of reliance that they've had on this gifting system has kept them from making a lot of the technological advancements. We do also hint that when these worlds were sort of connected, there was one that was more in control of sort of the technological advances. So when they had that cutoff, there was a lot of regression. And as you see various stories and books start to come out through Idris, some patches are a little more advanced. And some are more a little backwater. The ones like Latash that are more gifting centric are a little less developed.
And so in Bano, which is book 2's world, the steampunky one, a lot of the reason it's more primitive is obviously because the world is exploding. So there was a mention of train tracks, but you don't see any trains because everything was cut down. There was a mention of factories, but Scala was obviously trying to cut them off from supply lines, so factories were destroyed. In book 4, you get to see a little more of the technological advancements that are left over that Scala didn't completely destroy, because of characters you meet, but also places they go. And so you'll get to see a little more of it. But that's at least the reasoning for why Bano is more, at least in that book, kind of minimalistic steampunk. It's just everything's busy being on fire.
I love that. Everything's just busy being on fire. I feel like that should be a new tagline for your series. I love it. Oh, and I don't know if this is just me, but there was a reference in book 1 to the Great Lake and the sea serpents. And I have this really weird obsession with like the Loch Ness Monster and Champy, and that is what I envisioned. So I wanted to ask, are any of the things that you made in your fantasy world based on like any kind of legends of our world?
It's kind of interesting. I don't know. We have
some of the monsters
some
are
of the
Greek
monsters.
mythology based.
Yeah, the sea serpent in particular. I don't know that we necessarily based off of anything real life comparison, but
other than wishing sea serpents existed.
I'm kind of glad that they don't.
I know.
Okay.
Astra, Hugo, fascinated, scared. Common sense.
Oh, we have another comment. Jenny said, "T-shirt that line."
T-shirt that line. Everything's busy being on fire.
Everything's just too busy being on fire. I love it. Oh God. And I know I wanted to slip in like a writing question because I know we have authors in our group and that like to write. And I know you guys have been writing together for so long. Do you have any advice for authors that maybe write separately but are thinking of ever doing any kind of co-authoring with an author friend?
I would say the big thing is to find like what your own strengths are and sort of capitulate on your weaknesses. If you know that the one person tends to be better in that area, defer to them and take their input there. And then hopefully, you're in a good relationship, like working relationship there, and they'll be able to do the same for you in those places that are your strengths.
Yeah, I think the one of the biggest things that I hear from other people who have tried to do co-authoring, it doesn't work, is that the clashing. And so you really have to learn a healthy dose of giving and taking, and that does take both sides. So if only one of the authors is good at giving and taking, the other one will end up taking everything. So you have to find someone that's willing to sacrifice as well as willing to, if they really think that something should be a certain way, talk it out in a civil manner. So whenever we've had disagreements, which is rare and very far in between, but if like she thinks Asher should do this and I think that doesn't make sense, we usually make like a list of pros and cons and we sit back objectively and it's like, okay, so if we went with that, this is what would happen, and if we went with Niamh's version, this is what would happen. Well, one of them has more cons than the other, so let's go with this and see how it goes.
Oh, that's really good advice. I like that. Because I know too, I mean, when you were talking about your advice too, I think in some form authors all deal with that. Like if they go a traditional route, you're going to have agents and editors and, you're going to be back and forth. No one's going to sit there and be like, oh, good, first, as is, let's stick with it. Someone's going to want to make changes along the way. So I love that you have that relationship and gave that advice of, there's going to have to be that conversation that you have at some point that you're ready for and able to do. So I think that's really good advice. Let's see. Oh, and speaking of that relationship you guys have, actually, there's this quote that I wrote down from, I believe, chapter 13, and I thought it was so sweet. And I'm sorry if my connection is getting crazy. I feel like I'm hearing like these clunky noises, so I apologize. I hope everyone can still hear us okay. There is nothing to apologize for. I mean, part of being friends means dealing with the bad things as well as the good. And you are so much better at this than you think. I am glad to be counted as your friend. And when I read that, just knowing you two as the authors behind it, and I just felt like sitting there, like I pictured you guys having a conversation like that. So is there a lot of like encouragement and conversations at all that you have that make it in or inspire conversations and dialogue in your books?
Of course you're looking at me. Yeah. I would say definitely. In fact, we've even had places where we're writing in the book and we kind of have to step back and deal with the real life stuff for a moment before we can continue with whatever the scene is. But
yeah, every once in a while, a character will be dealing with an emotional issue that is similar. And it's like, none of us have trauma, don't worry. But like it'll be like, oh, I'm dealing with this similar emotion, and so then you have to sit back and you have to actually kind of deal with it and talk it out, and it's really cool. So it's grown our friendship, but it's also grown us individually as people. And that's probably, I don't know, we've gotten a lot of comments about how real our characters feel, and it's probably some of the reason is maybe we take them a little too personally.
But you do it so well. Like, I think characters should feel real. It's a full immersion, world building characters, and your characters really do feel so real. The stories flow, and it's so detailed. Like you can just see everything making sense and step by step, and see the world around them as they're doing it. I love the way you guys write that stuff, and that line was just so sweet. And I just instantly, I don't know, just saw you guys having a conversation for a second. Like, I thought it was so great. I did want to ask authors, we've kind of alluded to it, you put a lot of themselves in a book in some way. Is there anything that you feel like you put of yourselves in this series at all that is most important to you, or most noticeable?
that's tough.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, like you said, everything is coming out of this sort of dynamic. It's all got to be out of it somewhere. So I think taking the important thing of it, like the most important thing anyway. I've never sat down and
like thought which it's hard because there's so many things. There's like there's so many different things.
I think one of the things, I don't know if it's the most important, but it's definitely important to me when I write, is that I want characters to be understandable and like relatable. They might be dead wrong, they might not be good people, but I want the reader to be able to read and to understand, and to be able to make still judgments accordingly, but to understand. I feel like that's important, and it's very easy to dehumanize people. They're still people. I don't know.
Yeah, I think our big antagonist, the goal is by the end is you understand what's going on with them. And you could per se see where they're coming from, but they're still wrong.
I love that though, because when you do understand where a character's coming from, even if they're not one of the good characters, It does make you think a lot more when you're reading too. Gives you a lot more feels than you expected, which is great. So I love that that's something that you really love behind your work. I think that's a great answer. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to stump you there with that one.
Oh, that's fine.
Let's see. I think we're getting to the end of my questions. So one of the things I like to bring up towards the end, and if there's still a few minutes, if anybody has any of your questions watching live that you want to add in on Facebook, definitely let me know. I know reviews are really, really important for authors. And it's important for other readers who might pick up that book to see what, how other people felt about it. So what do reviews mean to you? And my other thought is if a reader isn't sure what to put into a review, what would you suggest?
Well, I will say one of my favorite reviews that we have received thus far was from book 2, and it was pretty much just, and even that was great. So even if it's just screaming, whether it's a 5-star screaming or a 1-star screaming, it can be as simple as just like, 2 sentences of the characters were really real and I didn't feel bogged down by the details or something. Like, even if you find just 2 sentences of 2 things you really liked or 2 things you didn't like. When I personally write a review for other books, I like to say what I liked most about it. So usually when I'm looking at other books as a reader, I want to know if the plot was super predictable or not, if the characters were flat or actually really interesting, and if there was too much like description and world building, or if there was just the right amount. Because me as dyslexic, I have a hard time with, this is personal preference. I'm not saying that's bad. It's my personal preference because I'm dyslexic. I can't read long descriptions. I get really lost. So I tend to look for books that don't have too much of that in it. So usually I just see the world building amount, the characters, and the plot, and that's what I look for in reviews.
But
I don't know if
as
that's
she
helpful.
said, it's personal preference.
Yeah.
Reviews really come down to matching the right book with the right readers. So if you notice certain characteristics about it, then that's kind of the thing to throw in. Because if somebody doesn't like that, they know not to pick it up. If somebody does, now they know it's for them.
That's really helpful advice, because I know sometimes like people love a book and they either don't know that reviews are important, which is why I like to mention it all the time, because when I finally learned, I'm like, oh my God, why am I so far into my life just finding out how important this is? I read all the time. I need to go back and review every book I've ever read. But, and another thing is like people don't always know what to put. So maybe sometimes they'll put it off. Like it feels like a daunting task when they don't have any baseline. So I think that's some good advice. And the way that you mentioned, it's going to be different for everyone. Even just one line, the star rating is very important. Where is it best for you guys for reviews? Are you on Amazon, BookBub, Goodreads, any other particular places?
So we are on Amazon, Goodreads, and I believe we are on BookBub. I am still figuring out BookBub, so not very active on there yet, but I believe I uploaded the books correctly, so they should be there. And I think we're also on Barnes & Nobles.
Oh, perfect. That's good to know.
And we are also on Etsy through our younger sister owns an Etsy shop, and the books signed copies are for sale on that Etsy shop. And there are links through our website.
Yes, and I definitely recommend the signed copies. There's just something that it adds to it. I love signed copies. And I loved your books. I'm not seeing any other questions coming in. So did you want to leave us with any other information or updates on when your next book is due to release, or anything you'd like to let us know before we go?
Well, as we said, book 4 is currently off to the content editor, so as long as they don't come back and be like, well, none of this works, then it should be out by the summer. And this is continuing Fane and Bay from book 2. Book 3 is out now. Becca's working on the Tyron prequel. If you want to stay up to date with this, definitely sign up to our newsletter. Heather can vouch for us. We do not spam. I promise it is only ever very vital information. It's usually
Only for book releases,
it's really only for book releases, or if we have a blog post. Obviously with school we haven't been very free to, but we like to blog about writing advice and writing experiences and things like that when we do have time, which typically happens in the summer. So We will never email more than 3 times a month because that is the limitation that our website has. And we usually email like once every 3 months because it's with a cover reveal or a book reveal or
a sneak peek.
Or a sneak peek. For both book 2 and book 3, we have released prologues or the first chapter to those on our newsletter. So that is the biggest perk, I would say.
And if you're looking for other content, definitely check us out on social media. We post a lot of story-based stuff, artwork, maps, just fun things to go along with the series.
And then we also are always reading, so we like to recommend things. So feel free to ask us for recommendations as well.
Ooh, I love that. And before we go, did you want to hold up all 3 of your books again, just in case for when people came into the interview, so that they can see what your titles are when they're looking you up?
So we've got the first one, The Exiled of Shade and Shadow.
We have book 2, which is To Take a World, The Ghostmaker.
And then book 3, The Exiled, The Game of Wits.
Perfect. And I highly recommend. I just sat down and read book 2 this week, and I just devoured it. It's like 460 some odd pages, and I read it in a week, which I haven't read that fast in a long time.
Yeah, I'll warn you, several people have read book 3 in 1 day now. So beware.
I'm going to need to block a day when I buy it. I love it. And I'll be writing a review for book 2 and posting that. I did review for book 1. So very soon. And now that I know you're also on Barnes & Noble too, and the other sites, which I appreciate you letting us know, I'll head on over to those. Oh, Jenny Mosier said, all these books are impossible to put down. I agree. I agree. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for being here. And I know everybody's waiting for the drawing giveaway, which my daughter Gemma is going to be pulling in a minute. But we're going to be doing it off of the live, and it'll be at the end of the video when this posts on our corresponding book club hosted by Heather Skinner YouTube channel. That's a mouthful. It'll post on Monday morning, and then the drawing will be at the end of this interview on Monday. Because Gemma is 6 and she gets very nervous about everybody being live and watching. She feels better knowing it's posted after. So she said she'll do the drawing for us. She loves to pull the names. And she picks a different container for each drawing. So she decided to go with a very fancy sun hat for the drawing today. So we will do that drawing off camera, but it'll be on the end of this interview on Monday when it posts. So thank you everybody for watching live. I hope you guys enjoyed getting to watch live for the first time through Facebook at the same time. And Becca and Niamh, thank you so much for allowing me to experiment with this during our interview. I appreciate you bearing with me. And thank you so much for being here. This has been amazing. I love your books, and I can't wait to see more reviews of everybody else who continues to read your work too.
And thank you. We're always so excited to sit down and talk about them.
You don't have to tie us down.
Oh, good. We'll have to do some follow-up interviews later on because I love talking about your books, and there's so many more in your series to read, so I can't wait. All right, bye everybody, and we'll see you later. Happy reading.
Thank you so much.
So Gemma has joined us. She has her super cute floppy sun hat that she would like to use to draw the winning name out. So while you're shuffling the names, do you want to just remind them of the drawing? It was back in November. I apologize with the extended holiday break. So just to kind of refresh everybody what the drawing was.
So this was for anyone who purchased a copy of book 1 of Shade and Shadow. They would be entered in a drawing to win a paperback of book 2, To Take a World, The Ghostmaker.
Which is fantastic. And I don't know if anyone during the holiday continued to read book 2. Maybe they couldn't wait. If whoever gets their name drawn, could we move that to book 3 by any chance if they did end up reading?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you. All right. What do you think? Are you ready? Are they shuffled? Okay. She's drawn the winning name from the sun hat. I wish it was sunny out today. It is small. Let's see. Lynn Aspen is our winner. Congratulations, Lynn. So I will make sure to contact you and put you in contact with Rebecca and Niamh so that you can get your signed copy. Congratulations, and thank you so much for offering this awesome giveaway. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's been so fun to work with your group.